Hey, this is Matt Ertz, your Madison County Historian. I'm really lucky today to be here with Kirk Wardell of Marquardt Switches, who's going to talk to us a little bit today about what's going on with Marquardt. They have a manufacturing facility based in Cazenovia. Kirk, thanks for joining us. Just so folks that aren't familiar, can you kind of explain what Marquardt does in Cazenovia?
Yeah, so we've been here in Cazenovia for just about 40 years, and we are a German-owned company. So the mothership is back in southern Germany, about 45 minutes north of Zurich, Switzerland, so very southern part of Germany. And so it's a third generation family-owned company, and we have over 11,000 employees worldwide. And we make all kinds of switches and switching systems. Our primary industry and market is automotive. So that's about 2/3 of our business. And then the rest is a smorgasbord of many different types of industries. So power tools, a big one for us, truck and off-road, computers, you name it. Lots of Marquardt products are in those things you use on a daily basis. So we start your car, any of those buttons inside your car that you press for functionality could be a Marquardt switch. Mercedes is our largest customer, and BMW, Audi, Porsche, VW, GM, Ford, FCA. So we are in all but 2 of the OEM manufacturers for automotive. And then we make things like knobs and switches for Caterpillar excavators and John Deere tractors. And as I said before, power tool, the trigger switch and power tool that controls all the functionality and monitors the battery voltage are Marquardt products. And we're typically in the higher end products. We don't typically compete in the what we would call the commodity products, so the mass produced products, if you will. Okay. And so we have about 370 people here on the hill just outside of Cazenovia, between Cazenovia and Nelson. And the second generation Marquardt family started this location. It was the first one outside of Germany, which is interesting to me. So first location outside of Germany. Now we have 20 outside, inclusive of Germany, but 20 total locations with 11,000 employees. So really interesting business, and it's really interesting how we got here. So we're in the Trush Park. I don't know if you know where the Trush Park is. Yep. Right on Route 20. On the hill right outside of Cazenovia.
Awesome, thank you. Talk a little bit about when you guys started to hear about the pandemic and how you started preparations for it.
Yeah, so because we are a global company and 2 of our locations are in China, then we saw firsthand or heard firsthand both what was going on there. And so we had kind of a heads up that something was most likely going to be coming. Did we understand it was going to be the magnitude that it has been? Obviously not. Most companies haven't. But we did follow it very closely. We have a tight global community. We have weekly meetings with the general managers and vice presidents and management board. And so we stayed in very close contact. We saw what they were doing, and we anticipate some of that stuff. So for instance, we ordered face masks ahead of time. We stocked up on as much hand sanitizer as we could get our hands on. We got the hand sanitizing wipes. We started talking about how to set up our facility, again, based on input from our colleagues in China. So we were already thinking about taking temperature checks and social distancing and reducing non-essential workforce. So by the time it all hit here, we kind of knew somewhat to expect. And then, of course, state by state, it varied, and Governor Cuomo took a very active role and stance with COVID, which I think was a very smart move. So that's how we kind of got a heads up and prepped for it.
Talk about how it actually has impacted production at the facility in Cazenovia.
Yeah, so as I said, we normally have about 370 people in the building. Of that number, about half, close to half, are production related. And first we had to get essential business status. So we applied for that through the state and achieved that. Because we had a number of customers that were sending us letters saying, hey, we're an essential business, you're a supplier, so therefore you're essential business. And once we established that, that's great, but then you have to actually have customer orders to produce something. And so the orders dropped off very significantly over the last month and a half. And so we followed suit. So long and short of it is we have about 25 to 30% of our production related staff in the building producing products. And then we have some other folks that are working on essential projects, also intermittently in the building. So intermittently means they might come in on Monday or Tuesday, and then they aren't here for the rest of the week, or not here for the full week at all, but they're coming in to use the facility as needed. So we have test labs, we have prototype labs, we have certain machinery, we have a machine shop. So whatever's necessary for that project, folks will come in, utilize that, and then leave. So outside my office door, I come in the office every day, but outside my office door, an area that most likely would have on any given day 35 people has 1 or 2, as a for instance. Okay. So that's how we've been managing the flow of people in and out. We do temperature checks, we do questionnaire screening at the door, nonstop rotational sanitization of the areas that people are touching, separation in our cafeteria for social distancing. So just a whole host of things to keep our employees safe, which is at the very top of our list for Marquardt.
Okay. You guys, it was announced pretty early that you guys were going to switch to production for ventilators, because again, you talked about car dealers being your big thing, GE and Ford or some of the companies that are doing that. Is that still, because the curve to a certain degree has been flattened, is that still part of the process? And what other things are you have you adapted to in the moment for production for COVID-19?
Yeah, so first off, the switches that we're supplying to both GM and Ford for ventilator production are products that are already produced in our China facility. So we're not actually physically making them here. Fortunately, we, again, have this whole host of product offerings, and we were able to look at our catalog and find switches that we could ramp up to the next level. I mean, we don't typically make as many as GM and Ford wanted. So we ramped up the production in China to satisfy that need and worked very closely with both companies to get those switches to them. So there was some pretty extraordinary efforts necessary to do that. So we immediately put on increased shifts. We had to pull in materials, and actually Ford and GM helped fly those materials to their location to make that happen. So it was pretty interesting, and it was also pretty impressive as to what it took to just get our one switch as one part of the whole ventilator system to those 2 companies. But locally, what we're doing is one of our employees, Gwen Mannion, is very well connected to the hospital systems in Syracuse. And so she reached out to the hospitals, and we discovered that they were having troubles with some of their PAPR machines. The PAPR machine is the machine that has the air box on the waist. It has a hose that comes up to a hood, and then the doctors and nurses and so forth wear that to provide clean oxygen while they're doing their jobs. So the hoses between the hood and the air box were not designed for multiple use. They weren't designed for constant sanitization. And so we put together in our machine shop new connectors for both ends and a hose assembly, and then a whole host of other different types of connectors that allowed them to adapt one type of system to another. So a hose system from this manufacturer doesn't fit on this hood manufacturer, but we made all the connectors to enable that. Okay. And it also is robust enough that they can sanitize these things over and over again, so they get multiple uses, and they're not falling apart on them. So that's what we've been doing locally, and that's what we retooled some of our facility to do and support. And that's still ongoing. That started shortly after things really started, the COVID started ramping up, and it's still ongoing, and we've helped several of the area hospitals to provide these parts for them.
Talk a little bit about within the facility, how you're you mentioned that you guys had changed your lunchroom and stuff. and we've seen grocery stores in different places put up plexiglass walls, stuff like that. Talk about what you guys have had to change in your production lines and within the, to make sure that you're keeping everyone safe.
Yeah, so we've done some of those same things. You saw on the news, I'm sure, those little, like almost like a Mylar, it's like a thick plastic shield, and then some hangers. We've done the same thing between the stations on our production lines. And we also reduced the output on our production lines to reduce the number of people on any given line. So we have flexibility to go from like 5 or 6 employees on a production line to 3. So we reduced down to 3. We put up these little plastic barriers, and again, constantly sanitize. After each break, after each lunch, we'll have somebody come through and wipe down all of the stations and clean everything. Same thing in the cafeteria. We have a constant flow of our janitorial staff wiping down all the microwaves, wiping down all the seats, wiping down all the counters and tabletops and chairs and everything else. We've also been bringing lunch in for all employees that are in the building every day since this started. We've given gift cards to cover their gas to and from work. We've given vouchers for our vending system that we have within the building. So we've also tried to take care of employees that way as well. We didn't want them to have to worry about bringing their lunch in and bringing more gear and worrying about the safety of all of that. So we have an employee that every day goes and picks up the lunches. That also helps to support our local businesses as well. So we're covering a number of the places in Caz and all the way out to Manlius as well. With you know, that's a pretty considerable number, because if you count all of the folks in a building, we're closer to about 100 to 120 people per day. So you heard the numbers from production side, but when you look at maintenance, tool shop, validation lab, and so forth, we're in that 100 to 120 people a day. So she's awesome. Gina Nardella arranges everything, works with all of the local restaurants and delis and so forth, and then orders it, brings it in, drops it off, and it's just awesome. And all of us feel pretty taken care of with that approach.
That's fantastic, and it's a great way to support local business. We'll do one more question. How do you think this is going to impact your long-term production? Do you see this changing how stuff is produced, maybe?
Well, you know, I think the biggest part of it's going to be, you know, when is the vaccine coming? You know, I saw recently, I think it was Friday, Oxford over there in the UK had been working on a vaccine for a similar kind of virus. And so they've already been doing trials in monkeys that are most closely related to our DNA with very strong, successful results. Human trials are supposed to start in July, and they're already starting to produce the vaccine so it could be available as early as September of this year if it's really a successful vaccine. So I'm going to answer it 2 ways. If that vaccine is not available until the 18 months that we've been hearing about for most other vaccines starting from scratch, then it's going to be a very slow ramp and reduced production schedule, because we'll need to do the social distancing and sanitization, all those things we've already talked about. So if that really happens, and we're not going to have a vaccine until 18 months from now, then that would most likely impact the amount of product that we could produce, meaning a reduced schedule. Having said that, we don't know what the consumers are going to do. There's some very attractive incentives right now for buying vehicles if we just stick with that industry that we serve. So, you know, the first, I forget, 3 months in some cases, I've heard as much as 6 months are covered by the OEM. They're pushing out payments, significantly reduced interest rates. So there's just the one that's also very interesting is Cash for Clunkers. I don't know if you recall that program, but several years ago, the government and the OEMs were providing some incentive to get rid of vehicles that are less fuel efficient and might have some other mechanical issues. that would contribute to pollution. So that incentive also kicked in. So that whole package of incentives might be so attractive that us crazy American consumers want to run out there and get a new vehicle. And if that's the case, that could also shift things. So we're watching and monitoring all these different aspects, and trying to anticipate what's going to happen and therefore what we're going to ramp up. So here's the bottom line, super summary. We don't really anticipate any significant change or crazy buying sprees or habits anytime before July. So from now through July, it's going to be this really, really slow ramp up as each government and each state releases whatever they're going to release and getting back to some level of business. And then after that, we'll have to see what all these incentives and stuff do. And if this vaccine kicks in, then that would significantly change the outlook for the second half of the year. So not an easy way to answer the question, but those are all the factors we're monitoring and kind of what we're seeing.
Well, and it gives insight into what you guys are thinking, because really the truth is we don't know just what you said. I've read the same articles about the potential for vaccines and stuff like that. So Kirk, I want to thank you again for taking the time to talk to us today. Please stay safe, and hopefully we can talk to you sometime soon in a better setting.
Yes, Matt, nice talking with you, and it's a very interesting conversation, so hope to see you again.
Yes, bye.
Stay safe.